I've tried beating a randomizer Nuzlocke of Pokemon Infinite Fusion before, but in the end, Lance knocked out all of my Pokemon except for 2. They bravely went up against Champion Blue, but their efforts weren't enough in the end, and I stumbled right at the finish line. And so I made a promise. My name is Antlerboy Bisuniv Alive, and I will have my vengeance in this run or the next. So let's do this. We're restarting the challenge, and I'm here for revenge. To get us started, I grab a Charlotte. It's man's best friend mixed with man's best starter. Can it get better? No, but it can get worse. Yeah, Charlotte got Flash Fire instead of Intimidate, and I'm bummed about it too. But hey, by just clicking the subscribe button, you could make all the pain go away. After reluctantly becoming Oak's personal delivery boy, we can finally get some Pokeballs to catch some more Pokemon. And the first one I run into on Route 1 is a Meowscore, a combination of Meowth and Bulbasaur. And while it does have an attack-lowering nature, that Technician ability definitely makes up for it in power. And while we only get to use 2 Pokemon against Brock, we should pick up a few more options, first being a Tedderil on Route 2. Which brings up one of the restrictions of the challenge. To make this the true randomizer experience, I'm not allowed to just unfuse my Pokemon and mix them however I want. However, I am allowed to refuse the same fusion into its other form. I then head west of Viridian to Route 24, where I pick up a Maginot. And anything mixed with Magikarp or Gyarados is definitely something we'll accept. Speaking of which, my very first encounter in Viridian Forest is a Backharp. I mean, he's ugly even for a fish, and that's saying something. I then arrive in Pewter City, and the way the gyms work, they still have a type theme, but the type is randomized, so I fight the gym trainers to find out that it's a fighting type gym, which sadly is a pretty bad matchup for our team. But regardless, we're not backing down, and we have to take on the first gym leader, Brock. And something you might find very strange is I decide to lead with Meowscore despite it being a normal type, because as you can see, Stab, Technician, Fake Out is such a powerful tool, it's worth sending in a Pokemon weak to fighting anyway. His second Pokemon is Magirath, so even though I want to swap out, I can't swap into my Charlotte in the back since it would just get taken out by a Bubble Beam. However, it doesn't seem to have any fighting moves, so a second Vine Whip takes it out, granting us the first badge. Meowscore then evolves into Meowsore, which really is more of an eyesore. So I start making my way through Mount Moon, where I find a Turrinch, and I love him. I'm very glad I didn't get this one, it's gonna give me nightmares. What I wasn't aware of quite yet was that the real nightmare would be facing Lass Miriam, with her level 14 Dubite. I then make a foolish error going for Bite, but the Dubite just hits me with an Astonish, which is when I realize Charlotte only has 38 HP, and that Dubite most likely has Dragon Rage, meaning this angry dragon could potentially wipe out the entire team this early in the second attempt. And after setting up Sandstorm to raise its evasion, it uses Dragon Rage to take Marisa out. A very necessary sacrifice to bring in Meowscore, who can't even go for Fake Out against the Ghost type, but luckily we've got Technician boosted Bite to seal the win. It's unfortunate we had to make a sacrifice, but because of Marisa's courage, our starter gets to live on to see its first evolution. I then move out of Mount Moon to Route 4, where I pick up a Togepi, which seems pretty amazing with Serene Grace. Before we can take on Misty though, we do have one big challenge in front of us, taking on our rival Blue. And while we initially have no trouble at all taking out his Bunvesta with a couple of Bulldozes and doing the same against Magifish, once he sends in his starter, I face an unforeseen issue. I'm not allowed to swap Turrinch out because of Arena Trap, trapping us in and spelling the end for the Craterhoof Behemoth. Which means Meowscore once again has to come in to save the day, taking out Trio and then the remaining Hoppet with a Bite. Okay, I know Bill fuses with a Rhydon, but what if he accidentally fused with a Diglett? That would be weird. Preparing to take on Misty, there are a lot of evolutions we can acquire, the most important of which being our Gyarados Evos, which ends up looking a lot better once I reverse the fusion. I then take on the Ghost-type gym leader Misty, and after Meowscore handles her first Pokemon, Crocodose doesn't have too much trouble handling the Raltoom. Why has someone put this into existence? I'm so uncomfortable. Before we take on Lieutenant Serge, I make sure to evolve my other Magikarp fusion into Bados. Then after the usual 10 minutes of dumpster diving, it's time to take on the man himself. The now Fairy-type gym leader's first 2 Pokemon weren't too big of an issue, Flareol being taken out by Crocodose and Voltlia by Meowscore. The bigger issue on his team was Whimsicott, dealing pretty good damage with a Draining Kiss, and I completely forget I can't just use Leech Seed against a Grass type. Luckily, I've got a great option to swap into a Fairy-type move, my Fire-type Charlotte, which is when Lieutenant Serge pulls an ultra-brilliant 5-head strat. The man goes for Skill Swap, swapping out his cute charm for my flash fire, meaning that when I try to hit it with a fire fang, it just boosts its fire type power. And now that Whimsион's immune to fire type moves, I don't have any good moves to hit it with, so I'm forced to swap out, unideally swapping into my water type Crocodose. But Big Brain Serge completely reads my play, or he's just clicking random moves, going for skill swap and lowering my attack by stealing Intimidate. He then reveals that he's an absolute buffoon by going for skill swap once again, allowing me to get off a free Ice Fang, which activates his Citrus Berry. This gains him back most of his health, which reveals a bit of a problem, because after it goes for Swift and I take it down fairly low, it gets back most of its health after a Draining Kiss that almost takes me out. So I'm once again going to be forced to swap out. This time Whimsyon goes for Quick Attack twice, allowing me to fire off a cut since I can't go for any fire moves, finally granting us the third gym badge. This raises the level cap significantly, giving us access to a few new evolutions, like the fully evolved Money Frog. It could have been so much worse, so like the video for Money Frog. I also evolved Bedos into Sheldos, which is an awesome upgrade. Next, I start making my way through Rock Tunnel, and I don't know why my first instinct was to rock smash these rocks, but it did lead to me finding my first encounter. And while it's a really awesome looking Mewtwo, it's above the level cap at 38, so it's gonna have to sit in the box for now. Crocodose, however, can reach its final form, the amazing looking Farados. Can anybody tell me what I'm looking at?
Why are you running?
After leaving Lavender Town, I head west towards Celadon to Route 8, where I find a Larview, which I can immediately evolve into Poopew. And with the team ironically being not so crappy anymore, we reach Celadon and are about to make it a lot stronger. With access to purchasable Firestones, we can evolve Charlotte into Charnine. An even gooder boy. Don't touch the post over there, there's no secret switch behind it. Yeah, right. Excuse me, what? Nope, instead Team Rocket are hanging out where they belong, down in the sewers. And once we beat them, we take on the 4th gym leader, Erica. Normally, Erica is a grass-type gym leader that's no more difficult to beat than any trainer in the overworld, but this time around, she's got a team full of psychic types, which back in Gen 1 used to be the strongest type in the game, nerfed by steel and dark types, which I have none of. What I do have though is Technician Boosted Bite, which doesn't quite do enough to take out her Roomite, allowing it to set up a future sight and then heal up with a super potion. Another couple bites, however, and she sends in her second Pokemon, Diggross, which while it is certainly gross, doesn't pose too much of a threat since it just flinches after the first bite and goes down to the second. Zadrio, on the other hand, which aside from looking awesome, is a much bigger problem. With possible flying type moves, I have to swap out, and Bolas takes a lot of damage from Psychic. Not wanting to lose my Elder Dragon though, I swap back out into Money Frog as Zadrio locks itself into Uproar. I then make a huge misplay, thinking that I could just get some free damage in with a fake out here. The flinch actually snaps Zadrio out of its Uproar, which leads to Money Frog taking a Psychic and us losing our third Pokemon. Losing our Technician fake out user with access to Sleep Powder is a huge blow to the team. I then use Crunch, but just barely miss out on the KO, and it looks like a high roll Psychic could easily take me out. But she goes for Uproar, completely missing a chance to set us back all the way to square one, which works for me since I have yet to fulfill and exact my vengeance. And to get closer to my ultimate goal, I had to head over to Lavender Town to free Mr. Fuji from the Lavender Tower. Once that side objective was complete, I was given the Pokeflute to wake up the resting Snorlax blocking my path, which even ended up being the awesome encounter Million. Then since our level cap is now 38, we can finally evolve Charnine into Charnine, but this time he's the goodest boy. We can also evolve Poopew into Poopy, sure. Yeah, sure. Which leads us to our 5th gym fight versus Koga, who's now a bug-type specialist, which, come to think of it, he kinda already is in the Heart Gold Soul Silver Elite Four. And as you can imagine, with the bug-type being the worst in the game, he doesn't pose much of a threat. So I connect with his daughter, which gives me some strength, and head over to the Safari Zone to find another encounter, which is where I stumble upon the god of this world, Ardu, a glorious sight so rare mortal men such as I do not deserve to behold. In an act of pure vanity, I threw the Safari Ball only for it to instantly break apart, and the creator of all vanished before my eyes. And I stood there in awe of what I'd witnessed. I also saw Crappert, which I guess was cool too. My next mission was to save the Silph Company from Team Rocket taking over. However, I didn't know that I'd also be terrorized by my rival Blue, who this time wasn't messing around and had assembled a super strong team of 5. As soon as I saw him lead with Diogon, I knew there would be trouble. It immediately traces my Intimidate, lowering my attack right off the bat, so a Crunch will be less effective. Blue then reveals he has Discharge, almost putting Coma in a coma. And after seeing Crunch's pathetic damage not even dealing half, I have to swap out into Bolas to tank another Discharge. Barely deals less than half damage, I decide to risk it and stay in with Bolas as the Diagon just goes for a snatch, allowing me to take it out with a Crunch. And while this means I've eliminated a huge threat, it's done massive damage to 2 of my Pokemon. I'm forced to stay in against Gotrio because of Arena Trap, but it ends up missing a Dynamic Punch, allowing me to almost take it out with an Aqua Tail, which I then end up doing with a Crunch after it misses its second one. I then run into a problem. Literally, the Pokemon's name is Problem, so I have to swap out of Bolas, sending in Jace, who takes massive damage from a Stone Edge. I then try to take it out with a Stab Surf, but it's not enough against Probopass's massive special defense, and Jace falls to an Earthquake. If I keep this up, there's no way I'll be able to avenge the last run, but I can at least avenge Jace by sending in Ugin and taking out the Problem. Blue then sends in an Alakazam fused with itself, and I don't really have a great option to go into, so I just start firing off Surfs as it hits me with a Future Sight. After my second Surf, it goes for a Calm Mind, which gives it enough special defense to survive a third Surf, but it doesn't actually do anything productive with that boost, allowing me to take it out with a Surf, and the way this game works, when I take it out, I don't have to worry about Future Sight anymore. His final Pokemon is Pinsir, an absolute abomination, which I hit with a Flamethrower and end up getting a burn, completely neutralizing it as it just tries to set up again with a Swords Dance, but a second Flamethrower is enough to take it out, defeating our rival Blue. With Jace knocked out, we need a new Pokemon to add to the team, and luckily Mewtwo is no longer above the level cap. So I reverse its fusion and add it to the team, which means we've got to get back to business and do what we came to Silph Co to do and defeat Giovanni. But this fight is incredibly difficult, a multi-battle together with Blue. And Giovanni has some crazy powerful Pokemon, immediately taking out Blue's Weegar with a Shadow Ball from Banape. Mandos then uses a Dragon Dance to boost its attack and speed, and I luckily used a Will-O-Wisp to have its attack. Blue sends in a Mudgar, and Giovanni begins the next turn by hitting the Fur Dragon with a Stomping Tantrum, dealing over half, as Banape instantly deletes the second Gengar fusion with another Shadow Ball, and I fly up in the air. Blue then sends in his own starter Gotrio, which gets hit by a Sucker Punch. Mandos and Gotrio then both miss their low accuracy moves as I hit a Flying Gem Fly on Banape, which isn't enough to take it out. And the next turn, Mandos does the unthinkable, taking out our starter. You truly were the best boy. Blue then at least does something better than missing and does a bit of damage with Nightshade. I decide to send in Coma, and Intimidate doesn't actually lower their special attack, so it's pretty much useless. Thank goodness that Mandos wastes a turn going for Screech as the Banape hits a Shadow Ball on Gotrio, and Gotrio goes for a Nightshade, almost taking out Mandos. However, the burn and my Aqua Tail against Banape isn't enough to take them out, leading to Gotrio's demise, which is certainly a worthwhile sacrifice, allowing me to take out Banape and Mandos going down to burn. His final 2 Pokemon are Lickelax and Venuvar, 2 absolute abominations. But because I've got Brick Break on Coma, together with Torchamp, I'm actually able to take Lickelax out fairly easily. And because Venuvar doesn't have any grass moves at this level, I finish the fight without any further casualties. With Team Rocket defeated, all of Saffron City is unlocked to us, and we can get ourselves a free Shiny Stone. But we can also visit the train station to go all the way to Johto to Goldenrod City and pick up a Dusk Stone, allowing us to not only evolve Ugin with our Shiny Stone, but also Kaya with our Dusk Stone, and she looks awesome. I also pick up one of the randomized Hitmons at the Fighting Dojo, which ends up being a Pukutoad. Okay. It's a lot better than this thing, that's for sure. Get it off the screen. Our final mission in Saffron is to take on Sabrina, who's given up on her Psychic types in favor of Dark types, which doesn't work out so well for her since I've got great matchups against all her Mons. So I continue my quest for revenge by going south of Pallet Town to Route 21, where my encounter ends up being Ghasts, the feeling gas Pokemon. Yeah. And before taking on Blaine, I make sure to evolve my Pokemon, the first being Poopyrus, which I guess is a name improvement, and Nicol Bolas, taking on his final form as Salados. And while he looks awesome like that, reversing the fusion makes him look even better. Not wanting to be left out, Ugin also reaches his final form, Togedra. I then start exploring the Pokemon Mansion, and after running out of repels, I run into my first encounter encounter Shedther, which being a fusion of Scyther and Shedinja is actually insane. Blaine's entire gym has been randomized into a dragon gym, which would be incredibly threatening if we didn't have the water fairy type Togedra. Having stabbed super effective Dazzling Gleam against dragons turns out is incredibly effective in taking them out. His first couple Pokemon get absolutely destroyed, and his third being a dragon ground type, an Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam is more than enough for overkill. Once he sent in Rayvile, Ugin was at pretty low health, so I decided to swap out, sending in Yargle, taking an X-Scissor. I'm then hit by a critical hit Dragon Pulse, taking Yargle into the red, and an Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam isn't enough to take Rayvile out. Rayvile could then easily just take me out, but goes for False Swipe, leaving Yargle at 1 HP, allowing it to take out Rayvile. You actually did something, Yargle. Defeating Blaine means we have one of the most difficult boss fights in all of Pokemon ahead of us, so we need to prepare well. So the first thing I do is to evolve Shedther into Shedzor. I then grab my Feeling Gas Pokemon out of the box and evolve it into Genvar, which I end up reversing into Gardevoir for the better speed before I head over to Mount Ember, where Team Rocket have been fusing together the 3 legendary birds into a boss fight that isn't randomized even in a randomizer. This has both positives and negatives. It means we can plan a little bit better for the fight, but it also means we have to face the strongest enemy in the game. Zapmo is an absolute beast and gets to attack with all 3 of the birds. And since any of my Pokemon would be knocked out from the 3 hits, I decide to lead with Genvar and hit it with a Destiny Bond. Ideally, it would be Moltres taking me out here, since then we could just send in Shedzor and be completely immune to all their hits with Wonder Guard. However, because Moltres is still left alive and instead Articuno went down, I decide to send in Ugin to hit the Zapdos with an Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam for over half damage. A non-boosted Ice Beam isn't quite able to take the Zapdos out, but a couple turns later, I land the hit, leaving only Moltres. Ugin, being at pretty low health, needs to be swapped out, so I swap in Bolas, who takes a pretty hefty chunk on the switch. But the next turn, an Aqua Tail seals the deal for a decently flawless victory. And once we've defeated Team Rocket, Moltres sticks around to be caught, which is randomized into... For one final time, we have to face Giovanni in the 8th gym battle. And lucky for me, the man is committed to fighting types. So I first knock out his Luca Kazam, which does look awesome with a Flying Gem Fly. A regular Fly is enough to take out Golem and Hounate, respectively, whereas it takes 2 to take out Primerio, allowing it to use Screech, so I swap out into Ugin to take out Kragrath to grab our final gym badge. And with all the badges collected, we've got to prepare ourselves to take on the Pokemon League, and first get through Victory Road, where I find an Entei that's randomized into a Mew Dactyl. And while its sprite work is absolutely amazing, I don't actually think it makes the cut for the team, so I continue through Victory Road until I reach the Indigo Plateau. I then rappel my way through the power plant to get to Zapdos to see if we can get a powerful randomized encounter, and while it's a legendary fusion, Jumpgia just doesn't cut it. I do the same for Articuno, making my way through the Seafoam Islands, and it's randomized into a Tiff Knight. As my final preparation, I place Yargle in the box, replacing it with Hellkite, who evolves into Tyrannorus. Finally, a respectable name. With my final Elite Four team assembled, I'm bringing Coma with Aquatail, Crunch, Dig, and Dragon Dance. Kaya with Psychic, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam. Hellkite, which doesn't have wings, but it does have Outrage, Earthquake, Crunch, and Dragon Dance. Yawgmoth with Bullet Punch, Shadow Sneak, Night Slash, and Swords Dance. It's also got Wonder Guard, meaning it can only be hit by Fire-type moves, so how could we possibly lose? Serene Grace Ugin with Air Slash, Dazzling Gleam, Ice Beam, and Aura Sphere. And finally, Nicol Bolas with Aquatail, Dragon Claw, Crunch, and Fly. I'd made it again, all the way to the Elite Four, and this time, I was determined to not mess it up. Lorelei starts with Alamega as I send in Tyrannorus. I don't get flinched by an Air Slash, and a super effective Crunch almost takes out the Yanmega, so Lorelei of course heals up. My second Crunch, however, did get a defense drop, so the third takes out the Alamega. Her second Pokemon is Rairo, and while I could take it out with an Outrage, I wouldn't want to be locked in, and it's questionable if I could even outspeed, so I decide to swap out, sending in Ugin. It goes for an Extreme Speed on the switch, and then for another Extreme Speed the next turn, allowing me to fire off a quad-effective Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam, which of course takes it out. Third is her Ace Claw Cloydactyl, but since it doesn't have any fire-type moves, I can very safely send in Yawgmoth. I didn't want to send the ace up my sleeve out so quickly, however Cloydactyl is both fast and bulky with moves that are pretty effective against our team. Quickly realizing that none of her moves can hit me, Lorelei decides to swap out while mid-air into Arba, allowing me to set up a Swords Dance. But because Arba can't hit me with any moves either, I just Swords Dance all the way to +6 and take it out. Slowro is able to tank a Night Slash, however, one Bullet Punch later and she's only left with Cloydactyl. But after I hit Cloydactyl with Bullet Punch, something very strange happens. An interaction in Pokemon that I've never seen before. It might not even be possible to replicate in the main series games. Cloyster continues going for Skydrop, not allowing me to use a move. But then when the move's supposed to hit, it triggers my Wonder Guard and the move doesn't go through. Peculiarly, it doesn't let Yawgmoth take its action. It's like it's stuck in the sky. Obviously, I'll break out of this loop as soon as Cloydactyl runs out of Skydrop. However, when Cloydactyl runs out of Skydrop, it starts using other moves, but Yawgmoth is left in the sky, unable to take any action whatsoever and unable to switch out, which in turn means that I'm stuck doing nothing, just watching Cloydactyl run out of all of its moves until it struggles. Struggle completely ignores Wonder Guard, and because Yawgmoth only has 1 health, it falls to the struggle. And so, against just the first Elite Four member, I had lost my best Pokemon that was supposed to guarantee my victory. At least I don't have to lose any more Pokemon since Kaya can easily tank the struggle and finish off the remaining health with a Thunderbolt. I'd gotten this far, and I wasn't gonna let losing one Pokemon break my spirits. Bruno was next, and I was determined to make it through. This is exactly what happened last time. The Elite Four whittled down my team until I only had 2 Pokemon left. Was I gonna let the same thing happen to me again? As Paralysis took hold of Hellkite, stopping it from moving at all, I could feel my confidence begin to waver. But just then, Hellkite breaks through Paralysis and lands a Dragon Dance to boost its attack and speed. And with a crunch, I'd taken out the Magnarion. Was my luck starting to turn? As Bruno sends in his second Pokemon, Hound King, I'm expecting it to use a super effective ground-type move so I can swap in safely to Bolos, who misses an Aqua Tail and takes a massive critical hit Foul Play. I can't risk losing a Pokemon to missing, even if it is just 10%, so I swap out into Ugin, who takes substantially less from the Foul Play. And then in an epic sweep, knocks out the Hound King with a Surf, a Mawudo with an Aura Sphere, Dark Ninja with Dazzling Gleam, as well as Dark Choke. I'd made it safely through Bruno with all 5 of my Pokemon, only to learn that Agatha has a team full of dragon types. This is both good and bad for us. We have some great matchups against dragons, however, dragons have some of the highest base stats in the game. So we might be contending with some of the strongest fusion that this game has to offer. My heart sinks when Kofaros goes for a Swords Dance. There's nothing I can do except attack, and luckily, it goes for Grudge. And Agatha decides that Kofaros is too valuable an asset to lose and swaps out into Haxjax, which gets immediately destroyed by a Dazzling Gleam. She then sends in Gainine, so I swap out into Coma, who sets up a couple of Dragon Dances and then takes out the Gainine with an Aqua Tail, sending in Agatha's next Pokemon, Latichu. Unsure if I can take it out in one shot, I swap out into Hellkite, who can decimate it with an Earthquake. With 2 Pokemon left, she decides to send in Dragagiot first, so I swap out into Ugin to be immune to the Dragon-type moves and to try and take it out with an Ice Beam. But the Dragogiot survives, and at the very last second, she swaps out into Kofaros, which also just barely survives the Ice Beam. And in a cruel twist of fate, the Kofaros goes for Destiny Bond, so as I take it out with an Ice Beam, Ugin is taken alongside with it, leaving me with a Dragogiot to easily take out, but once again, I'm down another Pokemon. And so with only 4 Pokemon left, Lance reveals my worst nightmare. He's an ice trainer. It was happening again. History was repeating itself, giving Lance a type that I struggle against. Is he going to take most of my team away from me again? An unthinkable fate that I'm unwilling to repeat. If I could just get through this fight unscathed, I'd have 4 Pokemon to take on the champion. I begin by destroying his Hitmonvile with a Psychic, sending in Duga. A Flamethrower barely touches it, and it ends up getting a critical hit Ice Beam, almost taking Kaya out. So I swap into into Bolas, who gets hit by a crit flash cannon, which barely does anything. So I strike back with a crit of my own, taking Duga down into the red. Lance of course uses a full restore, giving me a free chance to use a Dragon Claw, almost doing half, and prompting Lance to swap out into Ducerus. However, I'm faster, and 2 Dragon Claws is enough to take it out. Duga comes back, and a second Dragon Claw gets a critical hit, taking out its remaining health. He then sends in a Siren, and a Dragon-type move could do devastating damage, so I decide to swap into Coma to get off an Intimidate to lower its attack. Resisted Ironhead does pathetic damage, so I decide to burrow myself underground to go for Dig as Siren sets up a Swords Dance. However, Lance just swaps out. This does lose his +1 Swords Dance boost after Intimidate, but Jinvor takes a lot less damage from Dig. After we both miss, I'm hit by a Ring Out, doing substantial damage as I go for an Aqua Tail. Jinvor rings Coma out again, but it's not quite enough to take it out, and another Aqua Tail takes out the Nightmare Fuel. Lance now only has 1 Pokemon left. We can do this. Coma's at such low HP, so I decide to swap out into Hellkite, who takes a lot of damage from Dragon Pulse. It then heals up a little bit with a random Oranberry I gave it, since I didn't have any better items. But that's when it happens. I now have no Pokemon that could survive a switch. So Hellkite takes the full force of an Ironhead and faints. Lance had done it. While I had a free switch into Kaya, who can take out Siren with a quad-effective flamethrower, Lance had done what he came to do, and whittled down my team to a measly 3. As I passed through that door into the champion room with only 3 Pokemon to my name, my past flashed before my eyes. Was I doomed to the same fate again? Only one way to find out, Blue. With only half a team, I still had 50% more Pokemon than I went into the champion fight with last time. And immediately, Coma has an excellent matchup versus this Rapidash Muck fusion. And while it does survive an Aqua Tail in the red, it makes Blue waste a full restore and giving me the chance to set up a free Dragon Dance. I then set up a second one as I'm hit by a Flare Blitz, dealing some pretty pathetic resisted damage. Blue then wastes another full restore at almost full health, giving me a third Dragon Dance, and thus allowing me to use Dig and take the ugly fusion out with a quad-effective Dig. His second Pokemon is Nidolasum, so I go for a +3 Crunch, which activates Poison Point. However, I gave my last berry to Coma, which was a Pecha Berry. I'm then hit by a Petal Blizzard, taking Coma deep into the red. Blue then goes for another full restore, healing back up to full, and another Crunch activates Poison Point yet again. And unfortunately this time, the poison takes Coma with it, leaving me with my 2 final Pokemon. I decide to send in Kaya since she's got Flamethrower, and after a full restore, a couple of Flamethrowers is enough to get rid of the Nidolasum. Next, Blue sends in Duskgon, and 1 Ghost move from this thing and I'm done, but it goes for Mean Look, allowing me to hit it with an Ice Beam, and because it just tries to Mean Look again to no avail, we can take out the Duskgon for free, taking Blue down to just 3 Pokemon. He sends in his starter Go Trio and goes for Curse, as I hit it with an Ice Beam, which ends up doing a little bit over half. It gains back some of that HP with leftovers, but Blue decides to switch his Go Trio out and send in Victory Dose. And while the Ice Beam barely does anything, a Stab Twisted Spoon boosted Psychic almost takes it out as it misses a Hurricane, allowing me to knock it out with another Psychic. Go Trio comes in again, as Blue and I now have the same amount of Pokemon, and he just goes for Curse once more, meaning another Ice Beam takes Blue down to his final Pokemon, Polydose. I outspeed with a Psychic, doing a bit less than half, as it goes for Discharge but doesn't get the Paralysis. I take it down into the red with another Psychic as it connects with another Discharge, once again not paralyzing. I still had Bolas to back me up, but with one final Psychic, Kaya takes out Polydose, winning against Blue. I'd done it. I'd finally done it. I'd beat a Pokemon Infinite Fusion Randomizer Hardcore Nuzlocke. And more importantly, I'd avenged my fallen comrades Robogator and B-List. My work here is done, so let me know what you thought in the comments, and let me know if you think I should try this on hard mode.